Hi, I'm Dr. Lauren Tessier, and today I'm going to talk about the 5 overlooked signs of water damage in your home. So let's get into it. So to start, question. What is the first thing you think of when I ask, what is the most common cause of mold in a home? Did you think leaks? Maybe flooding? Totally great and reasonable answers, and those are definite causes. But it just goes to show how easily we might not think of mold caused by another source. So it turns out there are many sources of water damage that can happen in a home. And it doesn't always have to be this big, eventful, dramatic issue. It doesn't have to be a huge leak or a flood. It can be something as simple as increased humidity in the air, the ambient humidity, or maybe even a sweating toilet tank. Maybe the water coming into the toilet tank is too cold compared to the warm air around it. What I'm getting at here is as long as there's some type of water exposure, there can be mold. And unfortunately, the signs for these things aren't always as obvious as you think, or maybe as obvious as we'd wish. And so without further delay, I really want to chat about 5 commonly overlooked signs of water damage in your home. Number 1, first being bubbling paint. So oftentimes now homes are painted on the inside with latex paints, and these latex paints are a little rubbery and stretchy in nature. So what we end up seeing is that if water can get behind that paint, between the wall and the paint, then what happens is we create this bubble because the latex stretches. So if you go digging around on Reddit or Facebook or all that kind of stuff, you might see, what is this bubble coming off my wall? In actuality, it's water trapped and kind of stretching and pushing outward the path of least resistance, which is into the room. So what ends up happening, maybe after that bubble bursts, or maybe after it bursts, it dries out, and then maintenance comes in and paints it over again, I actually see a wrinkling in the wall. So number 1 is bubbling paint or wrinkled paint on a wall might be a really good sign that water damage has happened in the past. Number 2, musty smells in the basement. All too often, I think, especially in older homes, maybe here up in New England, people think basements are synonymous with a musty smell. And that's not always the case. That musty smell is something called Geosmin. And this is a particular chemical that is secreted, produced by algae and even a bacterial class called actinomyces. The 2 things that these 2 groups have in common is that they need moisture to thrive. So where there's moisture, it's water. And oftentimes, if you have water, you might have some mold kicking around in there. So that musty smell in the basement might be another common overlooked sign of water damage in your home. Number 3 on the list today is shadowing on walls and ceilings. So this was actually the first sign in my first severe mold exposure experience. It was the shadowing in the corner where the ceiling meets the walls. It wasn't really obvious. It was just kind of this couldn't tell if it was a shadow or maybe it was smoke from the wood stove. That's another big thing around here. Pellet stoves, sometimes they can billow smoke if you get a downdraft going. However, what we see when it's water damage or mold is that the water is coming through the drywall and kind of sneaking into the backside of the paint, resulting in the shadowy kind of darker spot. Some people again might look at that and think, oh, that's smoke from my wood stove. Could also maybe think that it's smoke from cooking, having poor ventilation. In reality, it could also be water damage leading to mold growth behind paint. So if you see any shadowing, definitely consider hidden sources of water damage in your home. The next one called nail popping. If you're familiar with construction, you probably know all about nail popping. Now, it's exactly what it sounds like. It is when a nail in the wall, to hang a wall, is pushed out into the room. So when, rather than being driven through the wall and into the stud, it's kind of popping out into the living space where you can see it. So a good way to check for this is to kind of run your hand over the nail to see if you can feel the sensation on your fingertips. It could be a really good sign that nails are kind of being impacted by the fluid around the nail and kind of pushing it out. So to explain that a little bit more, if you visualize a sponge and a dry sponge, you add water, you can see that it kind of expands and fills up. That also happens with drywall. Water, once it gets into the drywall, doesn't really have anywhere to go, so it kind of pushes in all directions. Well, when that water and that drywall kind of expands and pushes inward against the nail has nowhere to go but out into the room because it's tapered, right? So we will see in those instances be kind of like a raised little circle on the wall. And so it's always a good sign that if you see that raised circle, then you know that there might be an issue there. Something else that you could potentially see, even if like the nail doesn't kind of raise, or if you're dealing with a screw might not raise because it kind of locks into the wood because of the spiral. You can theoretically have a color change on the backside of the paint where the head of the screw or the nail meets the back of the paint. So having water there cause some type of oxidative changes to that metal, resulting in a color change. I've also seen that happen too. So nail popping, while it is typically a good marker of a settling building, or the building that's kind of heavier and weaker and settling down as the years go by, that can also cause that increased pressure and pushing out the nail. However, if that is happening in the home that you're in, it might be worthwhile to also consider that in the role of water damage, because if you have settling, you might have cracks in another part of your home aren't on your radar, and there could be water issues there. So if you see nail popping, definitely just consider the fact that it could be some type of hidden water damage kicking around. Number 5, wobbly toilet. Now, this one is interesting. This was another experience that I had wherein a good friend of mine over the time I've been interacting with one, or started as my IEP, my indoor environmental professional. And when he came in to do an assessment on our home, he said, I know about toilets. He said, you always want to check a toilet, and how you do that is you walk up to the toilet, you put a knee on either side of the toilet bowl, and you kind of see if you can wiggle it back and forth between your knees. If you see any kind of wobble or give in the toilet, you know that the toilet is not secured safely to base the installment, the piping that's coming up through the floor. And so when you have a wobbly toilet, you have a broken seal. Usually we have these things called wax rings that sit in the top of the pipe that feed into the bottom of the toilet. And that wax ring creates a waterproof, watertight seal of the toilet against that drain pipe. And so when the toilet gets a little bit wobbly, we can then start to have looseness in that wax seal, which then results in maybe a slow, quiet leak of water from the toilet into the area around the toilet, which then can cause an even looser toilet because that wood is getting soft and wet. The other thing that could be happening there is that water up against subfloor creaking or warping. That's another really good sign in a bathroom. You're having some hidden water issues. Another great example that can come up with this is loose tiles in and around a toilet. So number 5, wobbly toilet is definitely one that you want to keep an eye on for when you're considering some of these hidden signs of water damage in your home. So all of that to say, if you have any of these signs, you might want to start thinking about any symptoms that you might have while you're in this space. Are you having brain fog, fatigue, headache, dizziness? The list goes on, but those tend to be the most common. So it might be worthwhile for you to test it. And then if it tests positive, have it remediated. I want you to always try to get a hold of a really great IEP, an indoor environmental professional. And you can actually link to a video all about that. My YouTube channel reviews what process looks like. So definitely if you find yourself in a situation where you need testing done, check out my how to find a good IEP video. Maybe we can link it somewhere around. Now, when it comes to remediation, it's really, really, really important. You're not just removing the moldy wall or the moldy ceiling or, whatever that looks like. It's really important to make sure that you're also removing or addressing the water intrusion. So if I have a moldy ceiling, I pull down the ceiling, I put a new ceiling up, we need to make sure that you're fixing the leak in the roof or wherever it's coming from. You need to fix the source of the water. You need to fix the thing that caused the issue in the first place. That might seem really obvious to a lot of folks out here, but the reality is that if you are in fight or flight, you're stressed, you're scared, you're worried. When people are mold exposed and then having to deal with the mold, very few people can really think clearly in these situations or on their feet, let alone all of the packs of mold and mycotoxins on the brain. So it might seem obvious, but you do have to correct the source of the water. Now, if you've never done this before, then you don't know that you have to do it. So that's why I put it out there. So I hope that little piece of information, although maybe obvious to some, is helpful for many of you folks out there. So all in all, I'm so glad that you were able to join me through this video, and I really hope that you continue learning everything that you can about mold, and I'm so happy that you have joined me here to help find your life after mold. Thank you.